today's idea of the day is that planes should have a built-in self-defense mechanism. And let me explain what we're talking about here. So, why would you want a plane with a built-in self-defense mechanism? And for that matter, what is a self-defense mechanism? Well, to put it in another context, there are cars now, in fact, they're not even high-end cars, but there are cars with built-in self-defense mechanisms. You could buy a Honda or a Toyota that when an obstacle like a child crossing the street, a deer, another car, or whatever, if something goes in front of the car applies the brakes. Same thing if you're backing out of your driveway and there's a little child behind there, the car will apply the brakes. That's a fundamental and very simple self-defense mechanism. And there are cars with even more sophisticated self-defense mechanisms. There are a lot of cars that have lane assists, where there are essentially sensors and cameras on all sorts of strategic places that monitor the lines in the road. And when they see you veering out of your lane, they actually not only apply brakes as necessary, but they actually steer the car back into the lane. In fact, a lot of cars are capable, like some Teslas and Volvos going in this direction. They're going to actually have fully autonomous vehicles, just as Google does, within the next 5 years. These are cars that can steer, apply the brakes, use the acceleration, and take you from point A to point B without you even intervening. In fact, Google even is claiming that their new car can be purchased by a blind person because it has no steering wheel. It simply takes them where they need to be. All right, so we know it happens in cars. And in planes, there are automatic pilots that automatically can take off, land, and navigate from point A to point B. So we know that technology already exists. So why would we need to have built-in self-defense mechanisms in a plane? And what does that mean? Well, to put things in a very black and white terms, the single reason we need this sort of a system is to prevent terrorist attacks. And now what we're talking about here is that an aircraft is not only in jeopardy for the passengers of that plane, but they are an immense weapon. It is a missile. Essentially, we're talking about massive amounts of fuel, fireball in the making. We've seen what happens in 9/11, where they flew into both of the trade centers. They flew into the Pentagon. They were also aiming for the White House. And what was our reaction at the time? Well, when I saw it happen, I thought that planes already had a self-defense mechanism, so I didn't believe that happened. So what happened is that everybody focused on the fact that we need to keep these people from breaking into the cockpit. We need to keep these people from taking control of the plane. So they spent a lot of time on airport security. They spent a lot of time and money on figuring out ways of making sure that the door to the cockpit was, could not be opened from the outside. And all I kept thinking is, why are they worrying about how to get people out of the cockpit? I kept thinking, well, during the investigation, they found out that these people who flew the plane into the Trade Center were training to be pilots. They went to pilot school. So in a short amount of time, sooner or later, somebody that was bad would essentially be on the other side of the door. So this locked door wouldn't have made a difference if they eventually trained to be a pilot and became pilots. And last year, that actually happened. Last year, there were some terrorists, some sort of extremist again, who was a co-pilot, meaning he was on the other side of the door. And essentially, as soon as the opportunity came up, he seized control of the controls and he crashed the plane. And after the investigation, they realized what happened. And now, again, I have to say, well, if a plane is going to be potentially used as a weapon, it needs to have a non-overridable, autonomous self-defense. Meaning, if the plane knows through GPS, through altitude, through all sorts of very simple things, that the pitch is essentially heading for a trajectory that is unsafe to both the passengers of the plane and to whatever it's going to hit, that plane should have the ability, just as a car does, to fly away from it and, if nothing else, go into a safe holding pattern where it's circling around. There is no reason for a trajectory of a plane to ever cause harm to either the patients or the target. So in that case, fundamentally, it would just fly around, and if there was still no response, no air traffic controller essentially authorizing the plane to be in some sort of an unsafe variation from the flight pattern, At that point, the plane should then notify the military, and it should guide itself to the nearest airport and make all necessary preparations for the authorities to shut down that airport long enough for the plane to come down and hit the tarmac. And once it's there, obviously, the passengers are safe, the original target is safe, and the authorities could essentially try to, get inside the plane and apprehend the person who did it. So, basically what I'm talking about is self-defense that's not overridable. If there's ever a situation where a pilot or a passenger takes control of a plane and is causing some sort of real harm, these planes should take over. They should have their own built-in self-defense system that cannot be overridden. And I know there are pilots out there that say, well, you have to have a real pilot behind the plane. It's the only thing. No, you don't. I'd feel safer knowing that, Johnny Robot is flying my plane. Yes, I do like the fact that they are there to watch for problems. But if the plane itself detects some sort of really dangerous situation, I want to know that that plane can take control back from that pilot. And that's today's idea of the day. So hey, that was today's idea of the day. Why not subscribe and see a new one each day? And I promise you, some of them won't suck.